The polls are open in Tennessee, Arkansas, and Mississippi. Voters casting their ballots for the next leader of the free world and a number of other state, federal, and municipal races. Mike Carpenter, the principal at Carpenter Civic Strategies, is here in Shelby County, and he is joining us this morning, his strategist back on the red couch, to talk about what is at stake this November. Okay, just what's the buzz out there? What are you hearing about people just in their feelings?
Well, I think everybody's tired of it.
Just get it over with.
I think there's a lot of fatigue with the election, and folks are ready to know who the next president's going to be, and then take a deep breath and go about their lives, I think, is the main thing that I'm hearing.
I mean, and I know, okay, we are talking strategy. You're going to make some predictions, but can you just talk about, seeing maybe ballot boxes being burned? We're seeing that Microsoft found that there was some possible tampering from different countries. I mean, just what are those thoughts when you think about past elections and now?
Well, I think the thing that everyone has to remember is that overwhelmingly our elections are secure. I think that most of the secretaries of state around the country will tell you that, particularly after 2016 and 2020, that security has been upgraded a great deal, that extra precautions are taken, and that the vast majority of the votes in the country are safe and secure.
You say that, and I think that that's something that's important to touch on, because, I mean, people think that people are partisan in these different positions, so there's just this hope that the system itself will stay nonpartisan. So let's just talk about some early clues about how you think the election will pan out for the presidential election.
Sure. So I'll put my caveat on this, which is that so many things can turn an election, even in the last minute, especially an election that's as close as it is. But there are some key indicators that I'm looking at, and one of those, and so let me say who I think is likely to be the next president.
Who's going to win?
Yeah, I think that's going to be Kamala Harris. I think she'll be the first female president in the United States. And I also think it's not going to be quite as close as the polls are saying. I think she probably wins the popular vote by 3 to 4 percentage points is my guess. And there are three things that I'm really looking at, three major things. One of those is that there have been 78 million early votes cast as of today. And of those, when you ask people who've already voted who they voted for, Kamala Harris is winning overwhelmingly in most of the swing states. A couple of exceptions to that, but that means she's banked those votes. So whatever happens on election day, rain, storms, car crashes, traffic jams, kids sick, whatever, she's got those votes in the bank. And so it's a lot for, I think, the Trump campaign to overcome on election day, though I think there will be very high turnout today, and that a lot of his supporters will come out. The second thing is the gender gap. Women are overwhelmingly, especially older women and educated women who tend to vote. By educated, I mean college degree or advanced degree, that they're voting overwhelmingly for Kamala Harris. And so I think women are going to turn this. And then the third factor is that when you look at the polling among registered voters, but you sort of focus in on the likely voters, those who almost always vote, Kamala Harris has a lead there as well. So I think that she wins the popular vote. I think she wins the Electoral College by, roughly 298 to 240.
I mean, these are very specific numbers that you're saying. I mean, how are you calculating the Electoral College? Is it just the states that you're...
Yeah, so I think we all know that there's 7 swing states. I think the blue wall, so to speak, which is Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, are going to hold for Kamala Harris, though Pennsylvania is going to be super, super tight. I think that she wins Nevada, even though Nevada has been running a little bit ahead for former President Trump. I think she wins there because historically Nevada has voted Democratic in the presidential race, and I think she has a shot at either North Carolina or Georgia. Probably Georgia's more likely, and then the outlier that's really caused a lot of excitement, I guess, is Iowa. Iowa, which is considered a red state, a local pollster there who's very respected and very good, says that Kamala Harris is leading there by 3 points. Now, whether that's Iowa specific or whether that's some foreshadowing of other states that didn't get a lot of attention, it's probably just an Iowa thing. But if Kamala Harris Harris wins that, then I think that's going to shock a lot of people.
Okay, let's get local. What are your predictions on the referendums, if we could blaze through those?
Sure. The binding referendums, the ones that deal with the mayoral election and setting the pay, I think those are going to pass. I think for most people, those sound pretty reasonable. And unless they're all got some nuances to them, but unless you've really dug into them, I think most people will vote yes on those. On the 3 non-binding gun referendums, I think because of the level of violence and gun crime here, I think you're going to see heavy support for those who actually stay in the booth long enough to get there. Those are very long referendums,
so long.
And if you haven't read them in advance, you may just choose to skip those. So there will be some ballot drop off, but I think probably 70% plus will vote for those referendums.
Okay, and there's one local race that you specifically wanted to address. Talk about the race. It's District 97.
Yeah, District 97, Representative John Gillespie versus challenger, the Democrat Jesse Husath. I think Husath is probably going to edge Gillespie.
Really?
Now, I wouldn't be surprised if it went the other way, just as I wouldn't be surprised if the presidential went the other way. But I think that turnout in this district, which leans Democratic for Kamala Harris, is going to benefit Jesse Husath, and I think he probably edges out John Gillespie in this one.
Can you speak historically what that means to the state of Tennessee? Because I mean, we are a red state.
Right. Probably not a lot in terms of the supermajority. I mean, certainly the representation in the district will change. There will be another voice on the Democratic side, but the supermajority is going to hold in the state by far, and so I don't think it makes much difference there.
One quick thing, looking back at the presidential election, there are a lot of people concerned that the votes that will the count actually be as is said once the vote goes in tonight, right? Like, I mean, will we actually have a battle after the fact? Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, if it's close, or a state like Pennsylvania that can make the difference, I think there definitely will be a legal battle. I think just because of the way Pennsylvania counts votes, and Wisconsin for that matter, I think that probably what's going to happen is that we probably won't know for sure who the winner is until maybe Tuesday or Wednesday. I'm sorry, Wednesday or Thursday, and then after that, if it's close, I mean, both sides have their lawyers ready. They have a team of lawyers. They're looking at various scenarios. So expect some lawsuits to be filed. All
right, and thank you so much. We are hoping for no hanging chads. All right, thank you so much.
Exactly.
Appreciate you.